Welcome back, everyone. So we're going to get the main event started here. So we can all quiet down. So glad to be back here, and thank you very much to the Chicago Auto Show and Subaru for their participation in the program today. I'm just going to spend a couple minutes to introduce our guest speaker, Tom, because he says I can call him Tom now. So Tom joined Subaru in 1982 and has been with the company for 40 years. So Tom was promoted to Chief Operating Officer in 2009 and was named President in 2013. Subaru of America's parent company, Subaru Corporation, promoted Tom to President and Chief Executive Officer in 2018. And as President and CEO, Tom is responsible for overseeing the operations for the entire organization. So before joining Subaru, Tom worked with Arthur Young, which we talked about for a little while today, for 5 years. He holds a bachelor's in accounting from Villanova University, a Pennsylvania guy, and a master's degree from Drexel. He's also active in several financial organizations, including the American Institute of CPAs. So please join me in welcoming the most senior tenured CEO in the auto industry today, Subaru President and CEO, Tom Dahl.
Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing today? It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. You know, I always enjoy coming to Chicago, but especially today, where we just revealed our new 2024 Subaru Crosstrek, third generation Crosstrek. So if anybody's looking for a vehicle, we got one right for you up here. We're really excited about it. It was our best seller last year in 2022. You know, since the launch of the Crosstrek, it's quickly become one of our most popular vehicles in the subcompact SUV segment. And you can tell it's got perfect size and it's bold and sporty styling. One could argue that the Crosstrek has defined what the compact SUV should be and has set the bar for which competitors are measured. And the Crosstrek has won everything from media comparisons to being the #1 brand and SUV in its segment as rated by Consumer Reports. You know, I think at this point it probably makes sense for me to kind of talk to you a little bit about the history of Subaru in the United States. Of course, I'll give you the abridged version because I could talk about this for hours. We'd be here for 25 hours if I told you the real story. Because I think that'll level set the discussion that we're going to have later on the Q&A. The Subaru story, if I had to kind of sum it up, it's one of overcoming various cycles of adversity throughout our history. So what do I mean by that? Subaru's story in the United States market is akin, I call us like David versus Goliath. You know, we're a very small auto company going head to head, day in and day out, with much larger competitors. Our company in the United States started in 1968, which is 55 years ago. In fact, on February 15th will be our 55th anniversary of doing business in the United States. Our first product was called the Subaru 360. In Japan, it was called the People's Car, believe it or not. And our first marketing tagline for this, believe it or not, was cheap and ugly does it. How's that for marketing, huh? The old manufacturers calling this product cheap and ugly. It's unbelievable. To be honest with you, the car was really too small and it was very slow for the American market. Anybody who's been in a 360 knows what kind of vehicle it is. In fact, it was rated unsafe by consumer advocate Ralph Nader, and therefore the company almost went out of business in 1971. That was our first bout of adversity. What saved the company was the first Arab oil embargo in 1973, as well as the introduction of the 360 replacement, which was called the FF1. The company then enjoyed tremendous growth beginning in 1973, a period of growth that lasted until 1986. It was also in the 70s that we hit upon the idea of selling all-wheel drive sedans, wagons, and hatchbacks. In 1972, coming out of the almost bankruptcy situation, the company needed cash. So believe it or not, it went public as the first Japanese brand distributor of a public company that was traded under the symbol SBRU under the NASDAQ exchange. Yes, you could have bought Subaru stock back in the 70s, really up until 1990. Because of the popularity of Japanese autos in the mid to late 70s, as a result of the high gas prices and continued Arab oil embargoes, the U.S. and Japanese governments reached an agreement to voluntarily limit the imports of Japanese products into the U.S. market. This was called the Voluntary Restraint Agreement, or VRA as it was called back then. So the VRA started in 1980 and it lasted until 1984. The VRA essentially limited the number of vehicles that could be imported from Japan into the United States, and as a result, the market share of Japanese companies was quite limited at that point. We couldn't increase our market share even though we could. Through the first quarter of 1987, believe it or not, Subaru set the record for the number of consecutive quarters that the company set earnings records. I think it was like 58 or 68 consecutive quarters of increasing year-over-year profitability. So we were the darlings of Wall Street at the time. I came to Subaru in 1982, as Suzanne just said, during the VRA period, the voluntary restraint period. And I have to tell you, it was really quite an interesting place to be at that time. When I started the company, the stock price was $30 a share, and I remember saying to my wife we should try to buy as much of it as we could, but I didn't have any money. I wasn't rich and I wasn't good looking, so I'm sorry about that. But the price of the stock over the years increased to over $300 a share, and it did that twice, and the company split the stock 6 times to 1. So the management of the company in that 82, where I started, through 86 period of time, became, particularly those that had stock options, became extremely wealthy. So in 1982, as you might remember, some of you might remember, Ronald Reagan becomes president, and in order to reduce the size of the trade deficit and restore the strength of the U.S. economy, he pursued a weak dollar policy. So beginning in 1986, the yen appreciated significantly versus the dollar, from roughly about 330 yen to the dollar when I started in 1982, all the way through about 1986, down to 89 yen to the dollar by the time you get to 1989. So as a result, Subaru of America was sending less yen when those dollars got converted back into dollars. We were sending less yen back to Fuji Heavy Industries at the time, now Subaru Corporation. So what happened? What happened during that period of time? Well, obviously, our Japanese parent, or our Japanese company, they weren't really our parent at that time. They didn't like the fact that they were getting less yen, so what did they do? They increased prices fairly significantly over a very short period of time, beginning in 1986 all the way through 1989. And our sales and market share plummeted from around 180,000 vehicles a year down to 100,000 vehicles a year. This period lasted until 1994. This was the second period of adversity that struck Subaru. For those of us who've been at Subaru and still have the institutional memory, we call the period 87 through 94 our valley of despair. In fact, by the mid-90s, things got so bad that Fuji Heavy Industries, now Subaru Corporation, had to purchase the stock of Subaru of America that they didn't already own and take the company private, or else we might have been forced into bankruptcy. What saved us was that we began to understand that the U.S. market was fundamentally changing away from cars to SUVs. So we thought our heritage in all-wheel drive, we could participate in the SUV craze. In 1993, we began to experiment with various legacy wagon concepts, such as the Sun Sport wagon, an Alpine edition, and then something called the Outback. At the time, truth be told, the Outback was really just a legacy wagon with paint, with two-tone paint on it. That's really all it was. But when we looked at the sales efficiency of the Outback, it was incredibly fast. And it was 1 year later, in 1994, that the real Outback was introduced with its raised suspension, roof rails, aggressive grille, the type of Outback that you see today. Many in the industry credit the Outback with the start of the small SUV segment and category. Quickly following the Outback was the Forester in 1997. So the combination of Outback and Forester placed the company back on solid financial condition, and sales recovered quickly back to 180,000 vehicles. And that's when we also began a relationship with a gentleman by the name of Paul Hogan, which is an interesting story in and of itself. That's a rabbit hole I could go down, but I can't go down that one. Adversity struck again in 2001, and really around the time of Y2K, 2001, when the yen-dollar exchange rate began to get out of whack again, and Subaru missed the very explosive growth period in the auto industry between the years 2000 and 2007, right up to the financial crisis. Those were some of the best years that the industry ever saw in terms of sales. The market was consistently between 16.5 million and 17.4 million sales a year, but we were stuck at about 180,000 sales a year. We weren't keeping pace with the growth in the market. Our market share was less than 1%. We were essentially irrelevant. But we worked with our product development department to bring out new generations of Impreza, Legacy, Outback, and Forester in 2007, 2008, and 2009. And at the same time, we made the painful decision to price reposition our products so that we could reduce our reliance on incentives and recover our resale and residual values. This strategy worked. And despite the financial crisis years of 2008 and 2009, we were actually the only brand to grow right through it. So we knew we were onto something. With the new product introductions in 07 through 09, we modernized our product line to make it more acceptable for US consumers. In other words, the products got larger, they had greater utility, and much better fuel economy. We also focused on our Subaru retailers because we knew we had to increase their sales per outlet and their corresponding profitability if we were going to truly grow our market opportunity. You see, at Subaru of America, we really don't sell anything. It's our retailers who sell and service our products. So it's vitally important to make sure that our retailers could grow along with us. And that could only happen with greater levels of sales and profitability. In fact, in 2006, the average retailer had sales per outlet of only 330 vehicles, and profitability was only about $200,000 pre-tax. Contrast that with 2019, the year just before the pandemic, when the average retailer sold 1,120 vehicles and earned close to $2 million. We also changed our marketing in 2007. We began to focus our marketing and advertising on the value that's inherent in the Subaru. For example, our high safety ratings, our all-wheel drive capability, our high resale and residual values. We introduced the Share the Love program at that time, our very successful year-end event where we and our retailers donate $250 for every vehicle sold or leased to one of 4 national charities or to the retailer's hometown charities. In the 15 years that we've been doing Share the Love since 2008, Subaru and our retailers have donated over $255 million, and 70% of the donations under Share the Love now go directly to the retailer's hometown charity to build the bond with our retailers with the local community. Then, yes, good news, right? Then just as we were gaining momentum in our sales back in 2010, adversity strikes again. This time a major earthquake and tsunami struck Japan on March 11th of 2011. It didn't really affect our factories in Japan, but the earthquake took out a Renesas microchip plant that was located near the Fukushima plant that ultimately the Japanese government had to shut down. That lack of chips hurt our production. And doesn't it sound very similar to the story that we're experiencing today, which we'll probably get into? The earthquake and tsunami almost derailed our sales climb, but we overcame the issues, and that Renesas plant was moved and restarted in just 6 months' time. We kept increasing sales. In fact, we were able to achieve a small sales increase in 2011. In 2010, our sales were 263,000 vehicles, and in 2011, we were able to eke out a small increase to 266,000 vehicles. We think that was quite an achievement, given that for 6 months, our production was effectively stopped. It was also the start of what we continue to experience today with our retailers asking me at every opportunity, there's some right here that I know they've already asked me this, dude, where's my cars? Because we can't get them all the cars they need. It was also coming out of 2011 that we realized that we were capable of selling much more than 500,000 vehicles because the demand levels were just so strong. This is also the time when Subaru began an unprecedented run of 12 consecutive years of sales increases and sales records. From 2008 through 2019, we grew at a compound annual growth rate of 12.7% a year. and that includes 2011's earthquake and tsunami year. In March of 2020, when the COVID pandemic struck, it shut down our retailers, closed our factories, and disrupted our parts supply chain. And even today, we continue to face supply issues, especially with production of microchips. But we focused on the fundamentals, changed our sales estimates, focused on overcoming our distribution roadblocks, and made sure that our retailers remained strong and profitable. And now in 2023, we are optimistic that we are going to increase production and have our first sales increase in 3 years. But our next hurdle is to tackle the electrification of our product line as the industry moves towards electric vehicles, which is currently being mandated by governments all around the world. But we need to transition to EVs in the right way for us. And our first EV is the Subaru Solterra, which is on sale currently. So I urge you to all buy one, or two. We can help arrange that. Actually, the Solterra is unique in that we decided to make an EV that had all of the qualities of Subaru: safety, longevity, capability, including our legendary off-road capability. In other words, we wanted to make it easy for a person and a customer to live with an all-electric SUV. The Subaru Solterra is unique in that it's a joint venture with Toyota. This partnership allows us to get to the market rapidly as we focus on building a new dedicated EV production factory in Japan. So how have we survived it all? Well, we focus on the details, and we use a simple philosophy that so many businesses, I think, seem to neglect. We focus on the fundamentals and review them every single day with discipline. The fundamentals that we focus on are the customer experience in sales and service. We pay attention to owner loyalty reports and what customers are saying about what it's like to do business with us, and we make the necessary changes. We care for our customers, and we want to make it easy for them to do business with us, and we want to make our car dealers into more than a typical car dealer. We want to make them into Subaru retailers. And we hope that by our retailers becoming more than a typical car dealer, we in turn can become more than a car company. And you may have seen that in some of our recent advertising. We stay true to the values and the principles of our brand as represented by our Love Promise philosophy. We believe in being a positive, and we believe in a positive attitude and bringing that positive attitude every single day to our business. I like to say this to our retailers all the time, to keep your eyes on the fundamentals. Treat our customers like concerned neighbors with a positive attitude, and the rest will take care of itself. We won't have to worry about our profitability, our sales, or our cash flow, because our customers will make sure we are successful. So I'm looking forward to the Q&A with Suzanne. Hi, Suzanne.
Hi, Tom. Well, thanks so much for your comments. So interesting. As I noted in my introduction, you've spent now 40 years at Subaru.
Yeah, some might say too long.
Yeah, so nearly your entire career. But how did you actually get into the auto industry? And tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Sure. As Suzanne mentioned, I graduated from Villanova University in 1977. And I went to work for Arthur Young and Company, which is at the time was one of the big 8 accounting firms. And I realized as I got into the early part of the 80s that I didn't feel like I had the potential to make partner at the firm. So I decided to leave. And during the early part of the 1980s, as you probably recall, economy wasn't doing so well. You know, it was a period of time, late 70s, early 80s, high inflation. Jimmy Carter was the president. Ronald Reagan became president in '82. Interest rates were crazy, but there was one company in Philadelphia that was growing tremendously, and it was Subaru. So one of the gentlemen I work with actually knew somebody who knew the personnel person over at Subaru, and that's kind of how I got the interview, and then lucky enough to get the job. And I got to tell you something. When I first got to the company, my first day or two, first off, they weren't expecting me when I got there. I just show up for work, you know. Nobody greets me. They're not anticipating that I'm even supposed to start on that particular day. And I thought I made a mistake. After about a week, I called my old boss, this guy Ted Flacco. I called Ted up. Hey, Ted, I'd like to get my old job back. He said, I'll tell you what. He says, if you don't like it in 2 months, come on back and we'll just reinstate you as a manager at the firm.
Were you into cars growing up?
My father was always a do-it-yourselfer. But back then, you could work on cars. Now it's almost impossible.
And when you went to interview at Subaru, what was the car you were driving at the time?
I was actually driving a Datsun 310 at the time. I just bought it, by the way. It was my first new car.
So, what's interesting is, so in addition to being the longest serving auto CEO in the United States, Tom, you're the only American running a North American unit of a major, Japanese car maker. So, what's made Subaru's leadership structure distinct from your Japanese competitors?
I think with us, because we've been through so much, you just heard part of our story, and there's all kinds of subplots to that story that I just told that I could talk about for hours. But I think what separates us is the trust that's developed over the years between our American team and our Japanese colleagues that are in Japan. We're the ones that are stationed here. I have the great opportunity to work with these fabulous people every single day. And they always want to do what's right for not just the company, but for our customers. And it's that view and that shared philosophy that we've had that's kind of led us to where we are today. It's kind of interesting that if you look at some of the fundamentals of Japanese religion, Shintoism and so forth, there's a phrase in there that they call loving friendliness. So it's been part of the Japanese culture, our love promise, loving friendliness. So it's been part of Japanese culture for thousands of years. And we just happened to stumble upon it. It was unbelievable. I was in Kyoto and Nara, and our guide was telling us this a number of years ago, and I said, oh, this is unbelievable. That loving friendliness.
It actually shows up in the Subaru brand.
It does.
A little bit, too.
It's purposeful.
Yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to build a company based on the Augustinian values that Father Van Fletteren and people at Villanova instilled into me back in the day. So that's kind of how we've tried to develop our business and our culture at our company.
So just like looking back, on the last 40 years and kind of the arc of your tenure as a CEO, what do you think is the biggest change you've seen historically in the auto industry during your 40? I mean, we went through a lot in your presentation, but
I would say the change that's coming up now, this whole shift. I mean, this is a once in 100-year change in technology that we're going to have to adapt to over a very short period of time. So this change to electrification that really has to begin to occur in 2025, 2026 is going to be extremely fascinating to see how it all kind of plays out.
Yeah. Well, we just started to talk a little bit about the Subaru brand. While we were doing our research, I'm going to brag a little bit about Subaru for you.
Please.
But, Subaru was ranked the #1 car brand in Consumer Reports for 2022. You did not mention that in your presentation, but...
I probably should have.
Yeah, but and just as a, comparison...
I can't say everything.
Right, just to give you, that's tremendous, after this amount of time to be ranked the #1 brand in Consumer Reports. And just to give you an idea, BMW was #3, Audi was #6, Kia was #18, Mercedes #25. Unfortunately, Jeep was dead last at 32. But that just gives you an idea, I think, of how loyal these Subaru customers are and the brand that's been created. One of the things I did want to, mention, I think because of that, we're really proud to have Subaru. For those of you who don't know, Subaru has a plant in Lafayette, Indiana. They're our neighbor. And just it opened in 1989, has 4.7 million square feet, employs over 6,500 people. And it is the first ever US auto plant to be a zero landfill, and that was in 2004. So ahead of the game and really on point with the brand. So everything in that plant is used or recycled, and we started to talk about this a little bit, but I'll come back to that. But I really wanted to hear, how did you end up in Lafayette? And were you part of that group that made that decision?
They started making this. SBR Subaru Corporation made the decision to move to Lafayette probably in 1986. Because they had to build the factory once they made the decision to build it. I was not part of the decision-making process to go to Lafayette. But obviously Lafayette, the town, and West Lafayette has a lot to offer. You've got Purdue University there. There's a good workforce that's readily available. Yeah, it's here for Purdue, right? So there's a lot of great things that happen around Lafayette that we thought we could take advantage of, and particularly the skilled labor force. You know, you talk about like Consumer Reports. I think it's what's great about our company is that our Japanese colleagues in Japan create these cars to be #1 in the Consumer Reports rankings, right? It's all done purposefully, right? And I think that's something that we can take pride of because the cars are so well engineered. They are made for the customers. You know, if you talk to police officers, you know, about if you come upon a crash, or EMTs that have to extract somebody from a vehicle in an accident, they call them walk-away cars. Now, of course, not everybody lives, right? But in general, our customers live in a higher proportion of the time driving our vehicles than some other vehicle. It's incredible. And so we're proud of that,
yeah.
Right?
And really speaking of your customers, like when I think of your customers, they're very eco-friendly.
You bet.
They're, you know, nature-focused, and I think, you know, the brand itself, it lends itself. I think a lot of people, when they think of Subaru, think of like outdoor and their dog and hiking and camping, and the commitment to the environmental issues. And so I've personally found a little bit of a disconnect with that, with kind of and you just talked about this, like entering the electrical vehicle, you know, market, and the delay in kind of getting into that. So just to talk about that a little bit more, why the slow response, I guess, on betting on the future of these electric cars, and if you can maybe talk a little bit about that, and also how do you think you're going to be competitive, you know, entering a little bit later?
Sure. Yeah, the reason you have to understand, like as I said earlier, we're a David and Goliath story at Subaru, right? We're competing against the behemoths of the auto industry. Our parent company worldwide only sells about 1.2 million vehicles a year. You know, we sell the great preponderance of that. Maybe 70% to 75% of the vehicles are sold here in the United States. So for us to make the decision to move to electric vehicles, I mean, it really is a bet the company decision. So we want to make sure that the trend is going to really occur, because once we make that decision, it's almost like there's no turning back at that point. So we have to make sure that we make the right decision. And I don't think it's hurt us, because I think our customers understand our brand is to your point, our brand is so environmentally friendly. We have a great relationship with the National Park Foundation. You know, we're the largest contributor to the National Park Foundation. All the companies, all the business in the world, nobody donates more to the preservation of our national parks than Subaru does. They also, that's right. We also do, as you pointed out, with zero landfill, not just at our factory in Indiana, but really all of our places of business around the country. The headquarters building in Camden, New Jersey is zero landfill. All of our warehouses, our regional, our zone offices, all zero landfill. So our customers know that we don't just talk it, we actually live it and breathe it. But we also have to make sure that we're going to have we also have to make sure that the market is going to tip the way we need it to tip in order for us to maintain our profitability, so that we can continue to service our customers and have a viable market.
Where is the Solterra priced?
Our Solterra starts at $44,995.
Right. And then, you know, I guess just
that's a value, by the way.
Thinking about EV, and I know we talked a little bit about demand planning. I did some research. We saw that Subaru is planning on manufacturing 6,500 this year as a starting point. But where do you think, just thinking about Subaru's path forward with the EVs, in 5 years, do you have an idea of what you think the percentage of your EV vehicles will be for a Subaru, or a target?
Well, it's going to depend on customer acceptance, right? Mm-hmm. How quickly will customers want to purchase EVs based on the higher cost levels, time to charge, infrastructure? I mean, there's a lot of factors that have to still be considered before. What's the government targets? It's 50% by 2030. I mean, me sitting in my position today, I think that's probably a little high. But could we get to 25% or 30%? Yeah, it's possible.
So
And I
you
think
actually
Subaru's-
answered my next question. Where do you think
Well,
the industry will be?
I think Subaru, we could, because of the environmental nature of our customer, transition faster than other brands could, just because of our customers so focused on the environment.
Yeah,
They care about the environment.
And then I guess the next step on the EV, like the step after that would be really autonomous vehicles. And what is Subaru's take right now on autonomous vehicles?
Well, we have something called EyeSight, which is one of the best driver. Is this working? Best driver assist technologies.
Oh.
Use the microphone.
Should we just get?
Should I switch?
Oh, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me? Okay, hear me now.
So EyeSight, you were saying.
We have something called EyeSight, which is it's basically like another set of eyes as you're driving along the vehicle. So it can stop the car, from like 40 miles an hour. There you go. 40 miles an hour to a complete stop if it recognizes some danger that the customer might not be paying attention to. So what you're going to see us do is continue to work on developing different versions of EyeSight. Like we just launched the Forester or the Crosstrek here. That's got the most updated version of our EyeSight driver assist technology. So it's got a wider field of view, so we can recognize further out pedestrians or bicycles in a crosswalk or something, and potentially alert the driver and apply the brakes if necessary to prevent any type of accident that's occurring. But I think pure autonomous driving, like you're talking about, that's pretty far out. I think you might see it on interstate highways, things where limited access highways. But could you imagine here, think of just an intersection in downtown Chicago that the car would have to recognize. It's going to have to recognize a stop sign, a traffic light. It's going to have to recognize so many people that are going back and forth. So I think it's a little bit further out, but it's probably coming, but
we are starting to see that in some of the cars,
right,
for sure. So, we talked a little bit while we were prepping, just regarding your supply chain and doing demand planning. You mentioned that Subaru has 15 days of inventory, available in the United States. Like, how are you thinking about your demand planning right now?
We're just trying to get as many cars as we can. We'll take anything.
Right.
But no, what we do, we're probably just like all of the other car companies. We have a pretty good idea based on our customers and the number of vehicles that we've sold over the years, like how many Outback customers are returning, how many Forester customers are returning, how many Crosstrek customers are returning, so forth and so on. So we have an idea every year of what we think our sales potential could be, along, of course, with conquesting and customer referrals. But unfortunately, we're in a position where we can't produce the number of cars that we could sell into the market. I mean, clearly, we could be selling many more cars, not just us, but everybody could be selling many more cars over the last 3 years if we just simply had them available, but we don't. So it allows us to work on other things. We're working on our brand positioning. We're working on working with our retailers to make sure that they do become retailers, so that when the production returns back, that our customers get a great experience when they come into one of our stores.
And do you see your supply chain improving?
It's definitely improving. It's much better now than it was a year ago. It's much better now than it was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But we're still not, unfortunately, to the same level of
What
production.
do you think have been your biggest challenges in supply chain?
There's been a number of things. I mean, chips obviously is one. Some of the roving COVID shutdowns in China has hurt us because we get so much of our parts, and some of our sub-suppliers come out of China. That's hurt certain things like wiring harnesses and things like that. That's hurt our production ability. But it's slowly getting better.
Yeah.
There's no question.
There's just so many components that go into a car.
It's incredible.
Yeah. A lot of people have been talking about, I think would love to hear your perspective on auto industry and sales going into, this year. A lot of people, there's been a lot of discussion about, is there going to be a recession? Is there not? I think I'm hearing a lot of economists talk about not convinced, but not sure, right? I mean, everybody's hedging. Can you talk a little bit about what your take is on, do you think there is a recession coming? What's your prediction on the market this year?
Sure. I mean, I hope not. I hope there's not a recession coming. But obviously the cumulative increases in interest rates and subsequent increases in pricing has affected certain people's ability to be able to afford a vehicle. So I don't think there's going to be a deep recession, if there is one. I think there's just too much momentum. There's too much government spending that has to work its way through the economy. Remember, they just spent $10 trillion. You know, think about $10 trillion. The Earth has been around for 4.5 billion years. 4.5 billion years multiplied by 365 days is like 1.6 or 7 trillion days. So they spent more money than there have been days since the start of time. When you think about it, it's unbelievable. So I don't think there's going to be a deep recession. Now I do think I think sometimes, and I used to be on the board of the Philadelphia Federal Reserve Bank, and so I still have some contacts there. And sometimes I think the Federal Reserve is looking at older statistics. Remember, their data that they're looking at is 2 months ago, 3 months ago. They're not looking at things in the here and now. And I think this recession is going to be different because companies like ours, if there is a recession, we're going to be pretty gun shy on letting go any of our workers, particularly at our factory in Indiana, because we're not going to be able to get them back. We're fearful we're not going to be able to have them return back. So I think if they're looking for unemployment to go up. I don't think it's going to go up.
So along those lines, do you plan to keep employment steady in the U.S.?
We do, yeah.
Okay, great. That's
Yeah.
great news. Thank you.
Yeah.
So just to, maybe go back to one of the statements, we talked a little about what you think the biggest change has been. It's obviously, EV, autonomous vehicles. We started to talk about that. And, over the next 10 years, how many electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles will be on the road, who knows? But people are working toward that because of the government regulations. So, aside from Subaru, which automaker do you see poised to make the biggest gains in the next 5 years?
I don't want to answer that question.
Okay. Okay, I wanted to try. Okay, I was going to try.
Honestly, I mean, I know this is going to, we always are obviously concerned about our competitors and we keep an eye on them, but we're not focused on them. We have to focus on what we have to do because our brand is so different, right? We're smaller. We like, I think so many people in our industry go to the product right away. It's product, it's product, it's product. We have a different philosophy. Our philosophy, it's more about the people. And it's more about building that relationship. First with each other, so that we at Subaru America can have a great relationship with ourselves, so that we then can model that to our retailers, so our retailers then can model that down to the customer. So we think the customer relationship trumps everything. That the customer ultimately will decide who they want to do business with because they're good people. And they'll come back to us because we are. And they're going to know we're going to have the products that they're going to need for their needs in the future, whether that be an electric vehicle, an internal combustion engine, or something else. So our focus is on trying to do what we think we do best, which is creating that relationship. It's like, what do we want to be remembered for in life? And that's what we want our customers. We want to remember us for being a good company, good people in business, good business people, helping our local communities to be better and stronger, and trying to unite our local communities rather than dividing. We're so divisive anymore.
Yeah, and I think your comments too have been very consistent with how the Subaru brand is perceived, and the philanthropy that you talked about, and how ESG has. I mean, Subaru in some ways was like ahead of the curve on ESG before ESG was really cool. You mentioned in your remarks the Share the Love campaign, which was 15 years ago, and you think about how ahead of the curve you've been on that, and then just around environmental issues. One of the things Tom and I talked about when we were sitting was how even at his office, every food scrap goes into compost. I mean, that is so progressive, and I thought, God, if every CEO in this room did that in their offices, like how much waste we would be able to save if we required our office staff to compost their food. So it was a great, learning for me too. Yeah,
and we have a garden outside of many of our locations. We have gardens, and we use that compost as fertilizer to help grow vegetables and different things that we donate to food banks in our local area.
And so This is really my last question before we go into the lightning round.
The lightning round, uh-oh.
But this is before the lightning round. But just along those lines, no one would be surprised to hear that Tom is a dog lover. I was actually trying to find a picture of your dog, Molly.
Miss Molly, yeah.
Molly, but I couldn't find one. Your dealers, retailers around the country run dog adoption programs, and I thought that was absolutely brilliant. Again, in line with your brand. But how did that start? And any ideas on how many dogs have been adopted in the dog adoption program and the retailers that you have?
God, Alan, how many have been adopted? Oh, at least over 150,000, right? 350,000 dogs.
That's amazing.
Have been supported. And honestly, we've been doing the SPCA and sponsoring them as part of our Share the Love activations since 2008. They were one of the original Share the Love partners with us. And then, of course, our retailers. We have you mentioned the word brilliant. We have brilliant Subaru in the audience here that actually went to Virginia to rescue, 400 beagles? And they drove them back. The actual owner of the store and his general manager took their parts truck, repurposed it, put dog bins in the back of the storage, and bought these animals, these 400 beagle animals, out to the Chicago area, held massive adoption events last year, and got all of them adopted through Anderson Humane, which is part of our deal today.
It's amazing. So we can go to the Subaru dealer or retailer and adopt a dog. So you can go home with a car and a dog and be the perfect Subaru customer.
We try to. We don't call. I was kind of grinding Suzanne at lunch. We don't call our dealers dealers. We call them retailers, right? Because I don't like the connotation. I've been in the car industry a long time. I don't like the connotation of a dealer. Okay, let's deal, right? That's not what people are looking for today. They want a relationship, and so they're retailers. They're retailing a valuable product, not dealing. Right? And I think it helps our retailers think of themselves on a higher level. I think we get better people as a result of it, too.
Yeah, thank you. So we're going to do your lightning round. So quick questions. You
Okay.
got a couple of questions to end the interview.
Okay.
What was your first car?
My first car was a 1964 Chevrolet Super Sport.
So favorite car you've ever owned that is not a Subaru?
That was probably my high school car, the Chevy Super Sport.
Okay. Would you drive in an autonomous car in the city traffic?
If it were safe, I would, of course.
Okay. So in December, we had the CEO of Uber speak and to the Economic Club, and he actually gets on-the-ground feedback from drivers as an undercover rider. How do you gather unfiltered feedback from your employees?
We get unfiltered feedback. I get unfiltered feedback every day. If I showed you my email bin here, customers contact me. I probably get at least 15 emails from customers a day about different things, ways to improve the car, whether they're happy, whether they're sad. I mean, we get the best feedback. Plus, we do like what everybody else does. We have owner loyalty surveys and net promoter scores, and the customers actually do tell you what needs to be improved, either within the product or at our retailer level. So we get plenty of feedback, and we listen to it.
Okay, and then finally, when you crank up the music in your Subaru, what do you listen to?
George Thorogood and the Delaware Destroyers. Move it on over.